thank my colleague from Pennsylvania, Congressman Dwight Evans, for allowing me this time to speak. And I heard him talk about Dr. King's roots and influence in Pennsylvania. I just want to know, and this will be the only small moment of my remarks, is that as a Morehouse man, we remind everyone that Dr. King started at the age of 16 in his matriculation through college and his embarking on the world knowledge that he had at Morehouse College, which I spent just a few years at and graduated from myself. Let me say, and I hope that there are a number of young people watching today, as well as those seniors whose backs I stand on, because a lot of people talk about Dr. King's dream. And I just want to say here publicly, and I've said it privately so many times, we don't honor the dream. Everybody has a dream. The question becomes whether you have the courage, the fortitude, and the willingness to sacrifice your future to make that dream come true. And in this body, and as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, which now represents almost 78 million Americans, and serving with real icons who paved the way to make this a more perfect union, I appreciate now more than ever the sacrifice that went into making this country what it is. And because of that, and because of this time, let me just give 30 seconds of my history. My mother is from the poorest place in the United States. She had 15 brothers and sisters, and all she had was a mother, a very dedicated mother who was a housekeeper. We call her domestic or some other fancy term now. But she was a woman that woke up every day, that went clean other people's houses to make sure that her 15 kids had an opportunity at a better future. And you know what created that better future? Historically black colleges and universities. My mother went to Southern University. She shared a jacket with her sister, who was still in Lake Providence, which is about 200 miles away. I don't know how you do it, but they did it. But my mother, in that HBCU, because of the work of many people, was able to achieve an education which is the best way to lift yourself out of poverty. And she instilled in me two things. One, Cedric, you have to work hard. You have to do everything twice as good as everyone else so you can make it. And two, once you make it, you have an obligation to give back. That's what's so special about Dr. Martin Luther King and the dream and the day that we celebrate. A lot of young people sit around and say, oh, when I make it, I'm going to give back. Oh, when I grow up, I'm going to do something. Well, Dr. King did everything that he did at a young age. If you talk about the Montgomery bus boycott, if you talk about our leaders in the civil rights movement, they didn't wait to grow into leadership. They created their own path. And the remarkable thing is many of them sacrificed not only their future, but their life. So when you talk about Dr. King, and to a lot of my middle-class African Americans, let me say this. Dr. King could have sat back and said, I have mine, you get yours. Or my family is comfortable, so I will take the easy path. So for all of us that are doing well, remember there are a whole bunch of people who are not. We have this ice storm all across the country right now where we are hunkering down in our homes with heat. We have to remember that there are people that are hunkering down on the streets, sleeping outside under a blanket because that's all they have. So we have to, in the spirit of Dr. King, remember that we're the greatest country on earth, and if we don't think it's a perfect union, we have to make it a more perfect union. And even if it cost us our life, like it did Dr. King, and it cost him his life in Memphis, fighting for sanitation workers, we have to fight for the least among us, because this country is only as great as it's the least among us. And as long as there are people sleeping on the streets during this blizzard, that means this country is failing. When there are kids in public school that are destined for failure because we have not funded our public schools, this country is failing. So I would just say that all of the great things about Dr. King, the one thing that we should remember, his sacrifice, the courage, and the fact that he gave his life to make our lives a better life. And with that, let me just say that as I grew up going to some of the best schools in the country, integrated schools because of Dr. King and because of the person that I'm going to introduce, I know I stand on their backs, and I know that I have a lot of work to do to make sure that the generation behind me has that ability. But sacrifice is not easy. And when I think of it, I think of people that I read about in my textbooks, people I studied, people I admired, people whose autograph I sought. And now I actually get to call this gentleman, this distinguished gentleman from Georgia, a friend. But he's more than a friend. He's an icon. He is a trailblazer. He is a person who saved this country. And he, as a teenager, started his civil rights fight. He marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge knowing that there was hatred on the other side. And he met hatred with love. And he was beaten because he loved and they hated. But you know what he did? He marched again. You know what he did? He ran for Congress. You know what he did? He welcomed me into this Congress, and he paved a better way for generations so that we could go to some of the best schools in the country. So with that, Mr. Speaker, and to the gentleman from Pennsylvania who yielded, I have an opportunity to present, introduce, yield time to one of the greatest Americans to ever walk on the face of this earth, one who has sacrificed blood, sweat, tears, and who has stayed on his knees constantly praying for a better country. But he reminds us all that the Lord will order your steps, but you have to move your feet. And he moved his feet across that Edmund Pettus Bridge, and he was beaten so that I could vote without counting how many bubbles in a bar of soap or how many jelly beans in a big tub. So with that, I will yield back my time to the distinguished gentleman from Pennsylvania, Congressman Evans, so that he can recognize one of the greatest Americans and the greatest member serving in this House of Representatives, the Honorable John Lewis from Georgia. Thank you, and I yield back.
I want to thank our chairman, and that's why he is our chairman of the Congressional